Communication is something that is so vital to human life, and yet most of us usually take it for granted. It's our means of expressing ourselves, expressing our truths, and being seen by other people. And yet we kind of just use it as a means to an end. We use it to get what we want out of other people, whether it's a sale or, some sort of business outcome, or convince them of our perspective, or get them to do something for us. It's very common. So in this course, what I really want to challenge you to do is reframe communication into something that we use just with the goal of connecting and relating to another person. Instead of trying to convince someone to do something for us, instead of it being all about me, what if we made the conversation about we? And instead of trying to convince someone of our side of something, what if we really co-create a perspective that incorporates all sides? It's a very rich area to explore. And by doing this, you'll actually find that you can create stronger, longer-lasting relationships that have more value over time, that create more business opportunities, more happiness, more friendship. So I'm really excited to bring this to you, and I hope that you will enjoy this course. Okay, so jumping right in. Why connected conversations? It's so important to understand, why do we need to change the way that we communicate? Well, most of us, when we're communicating, we are using communication as a means to an end. You might, if you think about it, you'll realize that when you call someone up, you are usually trying to get them to do something. You're trying to get something from them, whether it's new business, or whether it's friendship, or whether it's just someone who's going to listen to you, and you're really serving your own egoic need through communicating. Now, the reason that this is flawed is because it only takes one person in the communication into account, when in fact, there's another person that we sort of take for granted when we're so focused on our own needs and wants. So when we communicate to connect, we're actually communicating to both express ourselves and to understand the other person, and then together to find a solution that works for both parties. And the reason we want to do this, why do we want to just, not focus on our own needs and make sure that we get everything we need? Well, because that's not sustainable. Having that approach towards life and towards our relationships is going to help us get immediate ego gratification, help us get immediate fulfillment in whatever we need. But long term, we're not going to be able to sustain those relationships, which over time can really provide us with a lot of value in terms of money, in terms of business, in terms of opportunities, and in terms of personal fulfillment. So when we communicate to connect, we are learning how to really transform these relationships that we have in our lives to be more meaningful and fulfilling. Some of the benefits, some of the many: achieving greater self-awareness, discovering and overcoming our negative and limiting thought patterns, developing greater empathy and compassion for others, communicating more effectively with others, taking risks and living more freely, selling more effectively. We all know that the more we can connect with people on a personal level, the more they actually like us and believe that we care about them, the more they're going to buy from us also and do business with us because they trust us. So the backbone of this framework is in cultivating the leadership capacity to be proactive rather than reactive. So that's a big part of this training, is challenging whatever you know about the existing dynamic of a situation with somebody, kind of just putting all of that in the back seat. Any past interactions you've had, the rules that are governing a situation, the environment that you're in, that's all important. But we don't want them to be the only thing that drives us. We want to really be able to be proactive in how we approach a situation and how we, kind of lead in a situation. So if the conversation is going a certain way and it's taking a negative direction, we don't want to just follow that direction. We want to, proactively take it into a positive, more constructive direction. And I want to just go into some basic, very fundamental neuroscience here. Don't worry, nothing too complicated, but this is really important to understand that, there are two parts of the brain. We have the reactive brain, which is limbic, which is much deeper in the brain. So this is a very early, sort of primitive part of our brain that developed, when we were animals and primates, and we needed to always protect ourselves. We needed to have social belonging for our survival. And so we developed these fight, flight, freeze, stress responses, always thinking, am I safe? Do I belong? And these feelings, these responses are very deeply embedded in our brains, evolutionary. Then later in our evolution, we developed this prefrontal cortex, which, as we became more complex in our needs and intellectually more complex, we developed these capacities for empathy, for insight, for regulating some of these emotions and, becoming more rational in the way that we respond to stimuli. And so that all happens in a completely different part of the brain that was developed after, much later in our evolution. So really when we are doing connected conversations or any sort of, healthy communication, we need to some level, bypass this limbic brain, this reactive part of our brain, which automatically gets turned on. And we need to be more conscious to act from the prefrontal cortex and act more rationally and constructively, which, it doesn't come naturally. It's something that we have to practice and consciously do. So if there's one thing I want to get out of this webinar that, we should try to always remember in our interactions and really embed into that prefrontal cortex of the brain, is that every human being has these universal human needs. So you can see in the center we have life. Around life, there are these 6 universal human needs that everyone has, no matter who they are, no matter what their beliefs are, no matter what their religion is, no matter what part of the world they're from. Now, everyone has these needs, but to varying degrees of importance and varying strategies for achieving them. And that's where some of the conflict comes in. But let's look at, what are the 6 human needs that sort of bind all of us as humans. The first and most basic one is physical nurturance. So this is, our need for sleep, for food, for sex, for shelter. So that's all within physical nurturance, basically the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we've got safety. So this is more the, emotional and psychological feeling of structure, of, being safe where we are, out of danger, physical safety, and, having some control over our lives, essentially. So why we might get like a full-time job. Then we have, the more advanced, I would say, self-actualization, which is our need for, fulfilling our potential. This is our need for being creative, for growing and learning and developing ourselves. So, why are you in this webinar right now? Because you have this need for self-actualization, to be your best self. And we've got the need for autonomy, which is basically, our need for freedom, our need to make our own decisions and not be a slave to anyone else or to anything else, to really be able to choose what we do in our lives. Then we've got this need for love and belonging, which is our need for connection, our need for understanding and for support, and our need to also give love and understanding to other people. And then finally, we've got our need for fun and play, which is, just that need for recreation, for entertainment, and to relax and enjoy ourselves. So the important thing to remember here is that, every human being has all 6 of these, But where conflict sometimes comes in is that people have so many different strategies for achieving them. Some of the strategies that we use, and this page, it kind of gives you some strategies for each of these that two different people might use, and that can potentially cause conflict between two people. So, let's go to play, our need for fun and laughter. One person in a relationship might find that, they want to go on a ski trip with friends, and that helps them get their recreation and their feeling of play and relaxation. While the other person may get their fun through going to a rave and taking drugs, and to each his own. I'm not judging anyone, but the thing is that these two people in a relationship, they would probably face some conflict because they have two very different strategies for achieving this goal of fun and play. And so what would be important in, helping to resolve this conflict is to really understand the deeper connection between these two people, that they both want to have fun, they both want to play, and they want to laugh, and they want to enjoy themselves, and they just have different strategies for doing it. So when they know that, there's something that's binding them, that there is something that they have in common, it can become easier to develop that shared solution that can kind of accommodate both of their needs. So, why does conflict and misunderstanding occur? Well, again, people have different ways of obtaining their needs, and the problem is that as humans, we are kind of wired to believe that everyone should be like us, when in fact we are all so different, and we have trouble understanding people who are different from us because we only know how to live from our experience. We only know what it's like to, live from our brains and our bodies. But the thing is that people are so different in the way that they are brought up, in the way that they look, in the way that they act, in the way that they think, and it's all just a function of, genes and environment and upbringing. So, it's important to understand that people are going to have different strategies and different ways of obtaining their needs than we do. But the problem is normally we don't understand this, and our limbic brain kind of reacts to kind of this feeling of danger, if somebody is doing something that contrasts with what we believe is right. And then we react, with unhealthy behaviors, these primal sort of baby behaviors that are wired in us from a long time ago. The fight or flight, the confusion, the resentment, the avoidance, the arguing, and even throwing things, sometimes becoming violent. And that's very common in romantic relationships. So when we are engaging in some of these violent behaviors, we can often use life-alienating forms of communication, which really just make the situation worse and, are just perpetuating kind of the unhealthy communication. So let's take an example where there is, a boy and a girl in a relationship. They decide to meet for dinner. And the girl gets to the restaurant at 7 p.m. That's the time they decided to meet. And the man, he shows up at 7:20. She's waiting the whole time. She's hungry and she feels uncared for. And that's the important part here, is that she feels really hurt. She feels, uncared for, neglected, and that she's not important enough. So instead of just sharing that in its truth, in its simplicity, she feels vulnerable, to share something that's just such a deep core pain. So she might use a moralistic judgment, something like, you shouldn't have made me wait so long. And that's something that is, kind of just like a judgment, something that can really alienate the other person. So, the guy is thinking, okay, well, who is she then to tell me what I should and shouldn't have done? She doesn't understand me. She could also make a comparison. My last boyfriend never used to make me wait. And that would, of course, also make him really resentful. Like, why is she comparing me to someone else? I'm a different person. She could make demands. If you're late again, I'm leaving you. Again, that's alienating. That's like, she's making threats, she's giving me ultimatums, and that's dangerous. And all the while, what she really wants to say, or what the truest, expression in her is, I felt really hurt when you made me wait for you. I want to feel important to you. How can we solve this? How can we make it so that I understand you and that I don't get hurt again? I actually want to go back here. Before making the request, it's important to share your feelings, your observation, and your needs, but also to understand, I want to understand what made you 20 minutes late, and why didn't you text me or call me? And then after understanding that, coming up with the request, what is the solution to this? How can we meet both of our needs so that this doesn't happen in the future? And finally, what if we could always remember? We have both been hurt and disappointed throughout our lives. We have the same underlying needs for love, for safety, security, growth, and freedom. What if we could always remember our hearts when we are in an interaction, especially when we're in a conflict, that deep down we both want the same things. We're both, very human, and we, at the very heart of it, we want to be good people. We want to do what's best for us and for others, and we're doing that in the only way that we know how. And so let's come up with a solution from there.